Wow, what a great day. And a great program we've had here so far. Nicholas, Knut, thank you so much for putting together another great program. It's a privilege to be here. And thank you to my panelists who have taken on the challenge of describing how we're going to get to accommodating our sustainability policies in an industry which has not always been known to support sustainability. We've got Constantin Baack, from CEO, MPC Containers, Kristin Holth, Director at Safe Bulkers, Maersk Tankers, GasLog, and Noble Corporation, Christos Tsakonas, Global Head of Shipping, DNV, John Lycouris, CEO, Dorian LPG, Mark O'Neill, President and CEO, Columbia Shipmanagement. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about sustainability in shipping and how we create value. We've heard a lot so far today from ship owners, from regulatory bodies, from ship managers to some extent. I thought it would be interesting to start with a quote from a charterer from the cargo side of the business and talk about what they have described as the key pillars of sustainability for them, and then to hear about how you see sustainability. What does sustainability mean to you, and how do you react to the charterer's strategy as they've outlined it? So, since we're in Norway, we picked Equinor. They've laid out 3 pillars of what is sustainability to them. Innovate to create low-carbon energy systems, accelerate investments in low-carbon solutions to decarbonize industry and society, secure access to affordable and reliable energy. That's how they've described sustainability, the must-haves for sustainability for them. Now, I got to tell you, as seeing it from the shipping side, I kind of underlined affordable as perhaps the key part of that, but maybe I'm too cynical. So the question for the panel, how do you see sustainability in your organization, and how do you make those trade-offs between the kinds of goals that they've described? Kristin, I'm going to start with you.
Is it on? Yeah?
I think so, yes.
Thank you so much, and I think it's a very broad question, because sustainability can be defined very, very narrow, but it can also be defined very broadly. And if you talk about the sustainable business model, you have to think about not just the near future, but also the years ahead. So it's not just about the E in the ESG, which we talk a lot about here with reduction of emissions. It's also about the S, the sustainability and the social part, and also the G, the governance. So you need to invest in all the areas. You need to invest in your team, in your people, in your talents, in a sustainable way. You need to invest in all your stakeholders, like the capital, from the banks to the investors. Obviously the technology. Find partners within the technology that make you competitive. And also the ship designs and make you certain that you have the most efficient ships. So it's sustainable business model is, do you want to be part of the future, and do you want to be competitive in the future? So it's really how you run your company in a way for the future.
So Kristin, I got to challenge you a little bit here. You say your response is we have to do everything, but maybe if you're Equinor and the price of oil is high, you can maybe do a lot of things. But is that practical for a shipping company that's a little bit smaller, dealing with a lot of competition?
If you want to be part of the future, you need to invest. And talking about investment is how you develop an organization, how you develop the talents, how you handle all your stakeholders. So we all do it differently on different levels. But unless you take that charge, how can you define yourself as having a sustainable business model?
Mark, how about you? Sustainability, what does it mean to Columbia Shipmanagement?
Thank you, Arlie, and thank you for having me on this esteemed panel. I think we have to take a step back, and I totally agree with Kristin here. ESG is so much bigger than sustainability. And I think as an industry, we are incredibly adept at taking a big idea like ESG, pouring it down a funnel with a very narrow neck and spitting out a concept that is only part of the entire picture. If you go to the boardrooms and some of the boards that I'm sure Kristin is sitting on, they're not talking about sustainability per se. They're talking about ESG. ESG is massive. ESG is a massive opportunity of which sustainability is a very important part. But sustainability is much, much more, or ESG is much, much more than sustainability. Sustainability is much, much more than decarbonization. And I think, we've got to, as an industry, lift up our eyes and look over the proverbial parapet and at the wider landscape. It's quite telling, isn't it, that a few months ago, the automotive industry, or certainly key parts of it in Germany, decided to go against the EU ban on petrol and diesel engines. Why did they do that? That didn't even cause a ripple in the shipping industry because we were so committed to sustainability, which equals decarbonization, which equals defossil fuels. Does it? The car industry, far bigger lobbying group than, dare I say it, the shipping industry, has behind the scenes decided to opt out of the ban of petrol and diesel engines. That hasn't even caused a flicker amongst the boardrooms of all these great shipping companies that we're sitting amongst now. It has to, because the petrol and diesel, the combustion engine will be part of the mix going forward, probably the biggest part. And it's these sort of issues that I think we need to be aware of and focus on as part of this ESG, debate. Is it a great debate? Certainly from our perspective, at Columbia, the Columbia Group, ESG is a fantastic concept and a fantastic philosophy, particularly after COVID, where we needed a flag to rally around. It's so relevant for bringing in business, for motivating workforce, for attracting talent. Arguably, you can't do any of those things without a credible, and I mean a credible, ESG strategy within your organization. So again, agreeing with Kristin, doesn't matter how big or small you are as an organization, this is not a tick box exercise. It's not, you have to tick all pillars of sustainability to succeed. Ask your people what they want to prioritize, and then throw your weight behind it, and you will reap the rewards accordingly.
Sean, sustainability at Dorian. Tell us, what does it mean to Dorian, and what are the kind of trade-offs that you see in achieving these goals?
Thank you, Arlie. Great to be with everybody here. I believe that the whole shipping world knows about what was coming, and it was evident 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We knew that we had to be a lot more careful about the environment, and we knew that we had to be socially responsible. And it's a great example that you brought up, Mark, about the car industry. The car industry realized very late that they can't do anything else but keep the old ICE engines going. And they had no other way because there's no technological advances. The same thing is happening in shipping. There are really no technological advances. When we built our ships, we tried to do everything we could at that time. What we managed to do was just scrubbers. There was no LPG engines, there was no dual fuels, there's nothing. We tried to put as much as improvements as we could in 2015. And the improvement, and I mean, we did scrubbers because that was the most available kind of technology we could find then. And we believed in trying to improve the environmental footprint of the fleet. And we did it. I mean, we did that. And of course, now we're doing everything that everybody else in the shipping world is doing. Technological performance improvements, operational improvements, that we can improve our signature, our emission signature, as best as we can. But the technology is going ahead, and we have to consider all these opportunities that we have. And then we have to train our crews. How the hell are the crews going to be able to cope with all this technology? They're going to be left behind. And we're going to have a huge gap between technology and the crew. So we believe that crew is the most important human the human element that we need to focus on. We need to train them. we need to give them the chance to understand what we expect from them and what is the importance of being responsible environmentally, DI, social is what Kristin mentioned. And of course, the governance for our company, of course, is very important as well. So these are all the items that I have that are spinning in my head this morning.
But John, what I just heard from you, I think the lens of sustainability for you focuses on the training the crew and making sure you've got an organization that's prepared and ready to adopt the new fuels and the new technologies.
That's right. That's right. And also, the technological and operational improvements that we're doing every day, implementing new systems, having data, telling them how to operate the ships, how to trim the ships, how they need to deal with new energy-saving devices that we have installed. There's so many things, Arlie, that we have to consider every day on operating ships. And we kind of operate in-house everything, technically and commercially. So we are really fully committed to this. But it is something that has been evolving for years now. And that's my key point to this. We have seen it. We knew there was coming.
Constantin, let me get your impression. For MPC, how do you see sustainability and how do you manage the trade-offs between acting now and keeping your options open for the future?
Well, I guess we have already heard a few aspects here. I'll try to give it a slightly different perspective from our side. I think sustainability also means to act economically sustainable if you just look at your very own company, right? I mean, we all have goals and we need goals. And we need to have ambitious targets when it comes to emissions and also the S and the G. We have, similar to what John said, we have placed last year a big emphasis on the S part, on the crew. Did a big crew survey because we also believe the crew is at this stage in the whole energy transition one of the key parameters that you should focus on. So we have identified a lot of things, a lot of stress that the crew is exposed to, have invested in new recreation rooms on board of the ships, have invested in also crew training. We believe that is a very key aspect. Obviously the E is the overarching and most prominent one that people focus on, and I think it's a big challenge for the industry. And there we have taken small steps. And I think as a rather ship owner organization, you need to make sure that you take sustainable steps also when it comes to your own capacities and your own balance sheet, and that is very important. We have done small investments in fuel startups. We have also ordered our first dual-fuel methanol vessels in close cooperation with our customers. I think that is important, and a very important theme when it comes to how do you behave and treat your ESG strategy is the collaboration and the interaction with your customers, because no one will solve all the challenges on their own. And I think that is very important. And I must say, over the last 3-4 years, the degree of collaboration and the exchange with our customers has had way more layers than it had in the past. And I think that is a very positive development and interaction. Very different also communication with our customers is in the core of how we define our ESG strategy going forward, but also to get some financial exposure. You only, in my view, you're only able to develop and step up the learning curve if you get some exposure yourself. And exposure means you need to invest in people, you need to invest in technology, and you need to take it step by step. That's the way we tackle it.
Constantin, now I'm going to keep you in the hot seat over there. We had Lasse sitting over there in the previous panel. He's going to fire all his customers who don't pay up for decarbonization. Are you having that kind of discussion with your customers?
Well, who pays the bill, or what's the question? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Well, in the end, I mean, I think it depends on the constellation, right? I mean, if you don't get exposure and don't take any risk, you will not move forward. That's my view. You need to take a risk that you can digest from both a balance sheet standpoint and also a strategic and also execution capability standpoint. That's why we started rather small with 2 small new builds. We will take it step by step. And I think it's not necessarily around who pays the bill. It's around finding common ground, maybe even a joint way forward. As I said, our new building project involved the cargo side, which is very unusual in container shipping. a charterer and an owner, and sitting down, finding win-win situations where you at least share risk and in a digestible form. I think that's the way at least we want to move that forward. So not necessarily having someone else always pay the bill, but be very cautious about the risk that you take and move ahead from that basis.
Finding the win-win is of course, the key for the industry. That's where we got to have the charterers stepping up with the owners. Christos, let me get your perspective on sustainability. DNV is a leader in sustainability. How do you see the priorities for the shipping industry, and how are your clients making the trade-offs between, as I say, investing now and maybe paying out dividends now?
Thank you very much. Well, being a banker used to be very easy. You lent money out, and as long as you did not get carried away at the top of the cycle, you were okay on average. Things are very different now. With sustainability, with energy transition, we are going through huge disruption in the industry. There are going to be big losers and there are going to be big winners there, and it could be some people that end up becoming extinct as well. So as a bank now, it's very difficult to figure out what is the role that we should play. How do we select our clients? Who do we keep? Who do we back? What is the life of a conventional ship? So questions that we could answer very easily before are not so straightforward now. So it's much more complicated. We have taken a very clear position within DNB. We have set very ambitious targets when it comes to reduction in emissions, when it comes to sustainability targets. We want to reduce emissions in our portfolio by a third by 2030. That is 7 years away. Down to 0 by 2050, which is where the whole industry is going. How we actually get there, that is a topic of debate. But we are very committed to get there. But the biggest challenge for us is which are the clients that we're partnering with? Are we aligned in terms of goals, with them? Are they doing enough to meet the ambitions and the targets that we have set? And inevitably, the ones who are not following the same journey as we will have to look to exit or part our ways.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the bank or your bank has evolved from kind of supporting what the ship owner decides to do, following the ship owner, to engaging more actively with your clients to provide input to investment decisions. Did I hear that right?
Not providing input in their investment decisions, but understanding what they're doing. If we agree with what they do, if it makes sense, we back them, and we have a very big cross-section across clients, across countries, so we can form a very good view. But we are not going to be the ones telling clients, put this engine or don't put that engine. We'll follow what they're doing. If it seems to make sense, we will back them, but we are not going to be the ones dictating which path they need to take.
Thank you. I'm going to throw a question here that we didn't have a chance to rehearse, and so forgive me, but I come from the States. And so one of the things I know very well is that the Biden administration has committed to decarbonization in a huge way. And for the Biden administration and for the Inflation Reduction Act and for the United States, what that means for this audience, I should say, is ports and terminals. There's a vast amount of money that's going to be flowing into ports and terminals in the United States to support decarbonization, to electrify, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just go very quickly through the panel. What kind of discussions are you having with ports and terminals to bring them into the decarbonization discussion? Mark, I'll start with you.
Well, again, what does decarbonization mean? Does that mean that we should all be looking at alternative fuels? Again, coming back to the car industry sees decarbonization as very, very different. Yes, alternative fuels are one option, but taking carbon out in the same way as we took lead out of fuel not so many moons ago, if it is possible to take carbon out of fossil fuels, and those fossil fuels can still be burnt by the very same engines that we've got on board our vessels, why isn't that a serious consideration that we should be having? Why aren't we sitting down as an industry, rather than being so insular and focusing almost wholly on alternative fuels as the solution? Why aren't we sitting down with other big industries and saying, why can't we work together? Because those very same industry, the car industries, are the biggest shareholders in the engine manufacturers on board our vessels. And it's wholly possible, wholly feasible, I am led to believe, discussing with those industries to produce an engine which can burn fossil fuel that is being decarbonized. Go figure. That's probably a whole lot cheaper than all of the investment and all of the brain scratching that's going on in relation to alternative fuels. So maybe the refineries will be producing decarbonized fossil fuels in the future and supplying our combustion engines with those. So we are having discussions. We within the Columbia Group have taken on a director to look solely at energy transformation of the future. We're talking to the engine manufacturers, we're talking to the refineries, and this is perfectly possible. This is perfectly feasible. And we're if we invested just a part of the huge amounts that would need to be invested in alternative fuels now, we would get to a solution which may just answer the questions that we had earlier on, that this is not for all of the regions of the world. We don't want to isolate ourselves solely as the EU on this alternative fuel sustainability, alternative fuel being the only answer to sustainability.
It is remarkable the difference between what's going on in the US and here in Europe with regard to sustainability, decarbonization. But John, let me get your impression. Are you talking to ports, terminals as part of that discussion about getting to sustainability?
Not yet, because the IRA would just happened. The main difference, as you know, Arlie, but I don't know if the rest of the people know, is that the Inflation Reduction Act is actually a subsidy for ports. It's not a tax like it is in the EU.
Great
so
point.
It's a huge difference between the one and the other. I think it will accelerate improvements in the ports and the infrastructure. And what would it mean for us, poor ship owners? Is it going to mean that we are going to need to be able to plug in and get shore power? It would mean that we may be able to deliver or debunker our CO2 and being able to clean up our ships from the CO2 that we're going to be able to capture and debunker it at these ports. And we're going to be able to get alternative fuels. These are the three things that I can think of immediately as potentially likely in this environment with the new Inflation Reduction Act, which kind of gives these huge subsidies for every ton of CO2 that is saved. I mean, we're talking about $80 a ton or maybe more. So this is a significant difference to what we see here in Europe, which is a tax.
Absolutely, a huge difference and a huge range of incentives. I realize our time is moving on, and I have had the pleasure of reading sustainability reports from all of your entities. And so I have a few questions having read those. And Constantin, I'm going to start with yours because you had a great phrase in your report, most recent report. We see transparent ESG reporting and stakeholder engagement as integral parts of driving positive outcomes. I haven't seen many shipping companies make a strong positive statement about transparency. How have you made it a success?
Well, it's obviously a sentence that you need to let sink first, and it can mean a lot. Of course, I mean, the way we have approached it from the outset in our company is rather young, to be transparent as of day one. And that is not just on ESG, it's on financial information, it's on a lot of things so that, all our stakeholders know what we do and know how we do it, and that we will continue on that path. And the same is right for ESG. I think engagement is a key word, and I alluded to a few examples when I talked earlier. I think key is also that as a ship owner, you need to widen your network. You need to actually establish new lines of communication to the community, and I think this is very key. I made that example of our new building project where we engage with many of our stakeholders. Likewise is, for example, for someone like us to be involved in all kinds of initiatives. The Maersk McKinney Center of Zero Carbon Shipping, we are not just a member on paper, we have really seconded people there. We are part of the Silk Alliance. I mean, to really engage with people in order to get a better outcome. And that is not just, on paper, that is also financially. I think a lot of the projects that we have executed over the last years, including energy efficiency upgrades on our vessels, etc., have been accelerated by the exchange with many other people in the industry. And I think transparency is a key element, engagement is another one, and that's basically what that sentence sums up.
Kristin, we hear from Constantin that he has found that broadening his network, that having more discussion across a broader range of stakeholders has been important. You've seen an extraordinary range of stakeholders in your role as director of multiple companies. How has that dialogue worked out for you, or how have you seen the value of that dialogue across the different stakeholders?
I think it's very valuable to be able to see this from the inside from several companies, because they all operate in a way different, because they're in different segments, they're in different part of the world, and they're listed, non-listed, etc. So we all operate differently. But to be involved in the decision making on this issue is obviously important. And back to some of the questions that came from the previous panel was the short and long term. I would say maybe, and that's a dilemma for the return and being long term. And for some of the private companies, we might have a longer line in our review when it comes to where we want to go, because we are not so focused on the next quarter results and how the analysts see that. So I think it's you can and then you can transport or take with you the knowledge you have from one company to another as to how they develop their targets, how they measure their targets, how they, for example, put it as part of their remuneration. Because if you can have targets, which is nice to have, but if you really, what's the consequence for the organization, for the team, etc. So to be transparent and open on how we can both measure and where we want to go. So I think it's the realism in going from the greenwashing to the reality for the company, and what we want to, how we want to perform, what and why we do that. I think what is something that I've seen core of, if you want to align the company with the clients and get in that direction where you want to go.
Mark, your report was very specific. You listed, you had 37 people across your company from the board level down engaged in sustainability activities. Kristin wonders if you're paying them, if their performance, if their compensation is somehow linked to their sustainability performance.
Well, they probably say they aren't being paid enough. Look, I think ESG. I'm a massive fan of the whole ESG drive, and as I said at the beginning, it's so much bigger than sustainability. If you get complete organizational buy-in, there is literally no limit to what the organization can do if it has bought into the ESG, and it really can transform and metamorphosize, if there's such a word, an organization. You know, from the seafarer on board the vessel who actually is given all of the relevant information, and they're very proud of our sustainability report and our ESG strategy. So that's why they don't breach MARPOL. They actually understand finally why. This is not a regulation in English, in very complicated legal jargon, which they have to understand. They get it. They want to get it. It's in layman's terms. It ties in with the whole, you know, in Colombia we have this I care philosophy. ESG ties in with that. It suddenly brings meaning to that. I went to Oxford University recently on a recruitment campaign because I wanted to get in there first and get these bright young things before they all went to the merchant banks and the big finance banks. And we put on this fantastic presentation to the students of all the services on the Columbia platform. And it was blank faces until we came to our sustainability strategy, until we talked about what we were doing for the victims of the war in Ukraine, etc., until we told them what we were doing as far as renewables and alternative fuels. And then the debate really took off, and we had 5 sign-ups that would ordinarily have gone to the merchant banks but are now coming to us. All they wanted to talk about, all they were interested in, was sustainability. It's fantastic what you can do with this for all the right reasons. So if I say in our sustainability report we have 37 people, actually we have about 17,000, and that's the entire workforce of the Columbia Group, all 100%, 150% bought into ESG. And the next report that's coming out in a month's time is even more exciting and dynamic than the last one, because everybody has been an author of that. Everyone has contributed to that, and we damn well make sure everyone does, so we get that buy-in.
Mark, I got to tell you that in our experience at Marsoft, the recruiting and finding how people want to, where they want to be in 5 or 10 years. If we weren't talking about sustainability, decarbonization, we wouldn't have access to the pool of people that we need to have. And they come with energy and excitement and a different perspective than traditional shipping. Christos, we heard earlier from Lasse. Lasse, thank you so much for all your quotable moments, by the way. We heard earlier about the role of the carbon markets. And it seems to me that you're creating a carbon market with the Poseidon Principles. And of course, Kristin, you were part of there at the moment of creation of the Poseidon Principles. Tell me, are the Poseidon Principles rewarding behavior that you've seen, or are they a way of actually influencing behavior? How are your customers changing as a result of the Poseidon Principles?
No, first of all, the Poseidon Principles was a fantastic initiative. It enabled us to put carbon, it enabled us to be able to measure the carbon intensity on our books. That was a fantastic tool, because once you can measure, then you can start setting targets. It has definitely changed the mindset in the bank. So that has made a very, very big difference. And that has also filtered down, to our clients. Having such a big body with a majority of the, big banks, together, pulling in the same direction, I think has made a very, very big difference. The challenge for the Poseidon Principles is to remain ambitious, but also to be realistic. Because it's one thing setting targets, but it's another thing ensuring that, there is a way and there is a path to meet them. Now, when it comes to the discussions with clients, everybody wants to hear that if I do an environmentally friendly project, if I invest in a new engine, you can have the margin. That's not the case. What happens is you can access funds easier, you can stay in the bank's books if you're doing the right type of investments, but it does not mean that if you invest in an ammonia engine, your margin is going to be a fraction of what it was before. What it means is that if you're not making the right decisions, if you're not going towards decarbonizing your business, you will find yourself not being able to access capital going forward. So it has to be more with availability rather than getting a favorable price.
So, Christos, as you know, Marsoft is closely engaged in the ship finance business, and we observe that there's been a growth in the non-bank debt providers or capital providers. Few of them, not all of whom have signed up for the Poseidon Principles. So you got competition out there. Are they? Do you find that you're able to compete and maintain the standards with the Poseidon Principles?
You have a lot of competition. You also have a number of Asian banks that are not signatories to the Poseidon Principles. But, you heard from this panel before, it's not something that you do to tick the box. It's something that you do because your workforce demands it, your new employees demand it, your family demands it, your children demand it. So you have to do what you perceive to be the right thing. Yeah, sure, you can get things cheaper, you can cut corners, you can do things in a different way, but is this what is the identity you want to have as an institution? And is this the identity you want to have as a shipping company? Yes, you're there to make money, but that's not the only objective that you, your workforce, your stakeholders are expecting from you. So yes, there is competition, but different people offer different things, and there is pluses and minuses everywhere.
Chris, we can't leave Poseidon Principles without giving you the chance to discuss.
Chris has had a very good explanation on the value of the Poseidon Principles, and I think it is actually an example of what also Lasse talked about in the previous panel, initiatives which shows a direction. Because somebody has to stand out, and I'm also fortunate to work in boards, in companies which really stand out and do have investments and take it seriously in many areas in order to make certain we can go as a leader into the reduction of emissions. But the Poseidon Principle, when that came in, it was to show where you want to go. It was not about the model. It was not about a single ship. It was to show this is where the capital market is going, and we were in cooperation with the industry. And we didn't know exactly where to go, how to go there. But we said, we want to go there. So I think that just showed that it's possible to show a direction and to take that lead. And that is what's so important, that this industry takes a lead and do the investments and have to think long term.
John, one of the ways you've taken leadership at Dorian is large vessels, modern, efficient fleet. I should emphasize a very efficient fleet. What are you going to do next to keep up that leadership?
As I said before, technology is moving very fast, and we're going to have to consider all possible solutions for the vessels. We're doing what everybody else is doing in technological and operational efficiency. I think dual fuel engines are doing their transitory, help into being able to improve our emissions profile. I believe that sooner rather than later we could do carbon capture, because that's a visible solution that is able to be done now, in a few years at least. We want to have our fleet able to trade easily until the 2030s, early 2030s, because it's a younger fleet. But I think that carbon capture is going to be a way to enable our fleet to live until its due date, until not only new fuels but new engines can come about. I think somebody mentioned nuclear. Somebody maybe didn't mention hydrogen engines, or an ammonia kind of derivative engine. And I do agree that the ammonia engine has problems. Not as much as as an idea, but it has problems in delivering a workable engine for the crew and for the safety of our crews, and that we could have the green ammonia. I think ammonia as such is going to be a great way to transport hydrogen, or to use hydrogen, which is the cleanest way to go forward. So that's where I see we're going in the next 20 years. But for the first transitory period, I think we need to have other solutions. That's my thinking.
Carbon capture has attracted the attention of everyone that's burning oil, hasn't it? It just is what you need to do in order to keep burning oil. Are we just is that wishful thinking?
Well, I think the car industry has done it as well. In a way, the car industry has improved the emissions significantly, not just CO2, but they have reduced emissions to almost zero in everything else. So I think that ships can do the same. They can reduce, easily 50%, 70% of their carbon output with the existing technology of carbon capture, from what I see. And I think that it's a viable, transitional way to see ourselves cleaning our profile, our emissions profile, and achieving targets that are very difficult to achieve post-2030.
Very good. Thank you very much. Nicholas, Knut, again, thank you so much for providing a great opportunity for this kind of dialogue. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing your insights today. It's much appreciated. Thank you.